Happy Tuesday, everybody. You're watching The Briefing Room, coming to you from the Washington Bureau of ABC News. I'm John Santucci, alongside Terry Moran and Mary Alice Parks. Big day for Thursday. We're not there yet. We're going to get there shortly, but we're going to begin today with the United Nations. President Trump giving his speech there up in New York earlier today, and there was a little interesting moment that happened during that remarks. We'll talk about it on the other side of this.
In less than 2 years, my administration has accomplished more than almost any administration in the history of our country. America's so true. Didn't expect that reaction, but that's okay.
Yeah, that was not the reaction any of us would have thought, because for a remark like that, Terry Moran, it was kind of weird how it played in the room.
It sounded certainly like the United Nations laughed at the President of the United States. First, I think they aren't used to hearing presidents get up there and boast like we are used to hearing President Trump do it. I think there are a lot of people, obviously, in that room in opposition to what he stands for. But then he rolled with the punches as he does. He kind of played with the moment, and by the end, the whole room was laughing, because it was a Trumpian moment.
Yeah, totally. And Mary Alice, we were talking earlier about this speech. It definitely didn't have any little rocket man or anything like that, but a lot of impact it can have on the world stage for the president in this moment.
And he reserved a lot of vitriol for Iran, but I was struck by this line. It seemed to sum it up. We reject the ideology of globalism and embrace the doctrine of patriotism. That obviously sounds like President Trump, something that Americans are used to, but in that moment, at that stage, in that environment, to make such a declaration is really unbelievable.
Yeah.
The problems facing the globe are obviously as complex as ever, and yet President Trump up there making it sound like any prospects for teamwork or building bridges, working together, being unified is far off and not in his interest.
And I do want to bring Jordan Phelps into this conversation. She's up in New York with our team that's been covering the president's trip at the UN all week. And Jordan, you know, that team that surrounded him a year ago, right? We think of that first speech he gave to the UN. You definitely heard Steve Bannon and Stephen Miller in those voices. The team that crafted this speech this time, though, had been telling us that you were going to see a different tone from the president. Definitely, hitting some of the targets he wanted to, as Mary Alice points out, but not as direct of a hit on North Korea like his target was last time.
Absolutely. In many ways, this speech was a study in contrast. And that line that Mary Alice quoted is one that I had flagged as well, because that was very Stephen Miller-esque, right? He probably slipped that line in there. But a lot of the people surrounding the president are different this year around than last year. The president also is coming onto this stage this year wanting to tout his progress and say, hey, UN, look at what I've done as president. So if last year was the fiery rhetoric, this year was sort of, okay, UN, here we are, second year in, see what I've done. And as everyone knows, that line that he started off with just fell so flat in that room. And as John, as you so well know, that's a line that the president is used to getting these thunderous applauses for in these rallies. So for someone who watches the president rehash that same line in different forms over and over again, it was really striking to see the world leaders just laugh at it. But he did kind of go along with it and move forward with his speech and made this broader appeal for kind of American patriotism over, globalism. But at the same time, we have seen the president this time at the UN say, there are some ways in which the UN and these international organizations have worked, and we're embracing them where they do.
And it's a false dichotomy, right? Franklin Roosevelt was not unpatriotic, right? Dwight Eisenhower was not unpatriotic. Right. George Herbert Walker Bush was not unpatriotic. These were American patriots. Patriotism is a natural emotion people have, especially Americans. But they can also say, let's solve problems through international institutions.
Or that we have to solve problems.
Or that we have to. Now, maybe the question is, and it's the question that the Trump movement raises, does America surrender too much sovereignty to something like the International Criminal Court, or in sometimes like the World Trade Organization?
Right.
Those are legitimate questions. But this Stephen Miller-esque dichotomy, which is either you're a patriot or you're a globalist, it doesn't square with the facts of our history.
Well,
People were both.
And you have to remember, too, him as a candidate, right? When he was sort of getting what his global policy was going to be, it was during an interview, if I remember correctly, with the New York Times with David Sanger, that they actually suggested to him, it sounds like your policy is America first. That sounds great. And he suddenly adopted that on the campaign. And that's how we saw the edumacation of Donald Trump, that as we all know from being out there covering him, and Jordan, you know this as well, when the president hears a phrase or an idea he likes, he will latch into it. And that's why today, even though it's surprising in normal circumstances, covering this president, it's standard operating procedure. That didn't surprise me at all.
When you look at what's dominating the conversation there at the UN, questions of Syria, the ongoing civil war, and the unbelievably sad humanitarian crisis, unbelievable humanitarian crisis that's resulted from it, climate change, Iran, North Korea. These are questions that the rest of the world has said we have to tackle together. Nothing will get done if we don't tackle it together. And so it is remarkable to see the President of the United States again say, and like he has said since he took office, that he's not interested in engaging with other world leaders on some of those topics.
And Jordan, before we leave you, I know you and the gang have been up there covering this. Tomorrow is a pretty busy day. We have another event from the president, also a speech by the First Lady.
Yeah, the First Lady is set to lay out an upcoming trip to Africa. This is a big deal. The First Lady has never taken a major transatlantic voyage on her own as First Lady. So we're set to learn more about what countries she's visiting tomorrow. And we've also learned that the president is going to host a press conference tomorrow evening at 5 p.m. right before showtime. So that's going to be a mad scramble for the press corps here. And this president, he makes big headlines on a normal day. He makes huge headlines on a press conference day. So we'll all be waiting with bated breath for that.
At least we know we got a busy day tomorrow. You must be so excited. Jordan Phelps up in New York and the team, thank you as always. We appreciate it. Let's switch gears. Brett Kavanaugh, that is one of the headlines. We've got two coming to a theater near you on Thursday. The president weighing in on his interview on Fox News last night. Let's take a listen to that.
I saw Judge Kavanaugh last
Could you give us some thoughts, sir?
I think he's just a wonderful human being. I mean, I think it's horrible what the Democrats have done. It's a con game they're playing. They're really con artists. They're trying to convince. You know, they don't believe it themselves. Okay, they know he's a high quality person. They don't believe it. It's just resist and obstruct. They're playing a con game, and they play it very well. They play it actually much better than the Republicans. 36 years ago, nobody ever knew about it, nobody ever heard about it, and now a new charge comes up, and she said, well, it might not be him, and there were gaps, and she said she was totally inebriated, and she was all messed up, and she doesn't know it was him, but it might have been him. Oh, gee, let's not make him a Supreme Court judge because of that. It would be a horrible insult to our country if this doesn't happen.
Okay, now, Terry Moran, one of the things that we do know is going to happen is that the Republicans on Capitol Hill, they have their questioner ready to go for Thursday's hearing.
That's right. An experienced sex crimes prosecutor is what they say. An outside lawyer brought in to keep the Republicans from doing what Donald Trump just did, which is sound very, very dismissive. He was reciting the facts as recounted to us by Ronan Farrow and Jane Mayer in The New Yorker, which is that she acknowledges she was inebriated, she doesn't have clear memories, but he just sounded so dismissive.
Yeah.
And so the way they don't want to sound.
Yeah.
So they've brought in, it might be a cynical political ploy, but as somebody who sat through the Anita Hill hearings, listening to all those senators unable to ask a decent question, I'm going to enjoy a proper questioning, certainly of Dr. Blasey Ford, and I hope of Judge Kavanaugh as well. Somebody who knows how to frame a line of questioning to respectfully and factually develop what is happening.
But let's just bring Catherine into this conversation, because she does have some new reporting as to what the president's been thinking on this. And Catherine, I know you've been talking to your sources over at the White House. What are you hearing about the change that we've seen within the last 48 hours here? Because the president had been pretty restrained. We saw that tweet from over the weekend, and that now, to what we just saw at the reaction to the UN to this interview, it's a very different Trump from where we were at last week. Just hear her out, let's hear her out, let's see where the story goes, to where we are now.
Yeah, exactly. And you saw this when he reacted to Ford's claims as well. Had restraint
for about a week and then, of course, named her. You saw that again today. Of course, White House aides were attempting to keep him a little bit more restrained, which you and I have both reported in the wake of Ford's allegations. But today, John, I think you saw the most forceful defense of the president, calling this con games, really the strongest yet, and specifically going after that second victim.
And Catherine, you know, we did hear from one of those key Republican senators that they are going to need, Senator Lisa Murkowski, about hearing these women out on the allegations. Let's take a listen to that.
It's very important to take allegations of those who have come forward, to take them seriously. And I think we need to go into this hearing with the view that we will listen to Dr. Ford's story, we will listen to Judge Kavanaugh's response, and then we will weigh what we have heard. I think it is important that we have a process that is viewed as credible and respected.
Yeah, so there you have one Republican saying what the president will not, which is that she should be listened to. In this case, Murkowski hinting that both of the two female accusers should be listened to first, and that judgment should be reserved. And I think that is what has been so shocking to everyone watching this story, is that a week ago, like you said, there was still conversation from Republicans that they would reserve judgment. Now, it's pretty unbelievably brave for the professor to fly across the country, to drive across the country, to show up here and tell her story when half of the jury is essentially already saying they've made up their mind.
Yeah, on both sides. I mean, and Terry, you know,
no, I don't think on both sides, actually. Democrats have consistently called for investigations, which is asking for more facts to come
but I'm
out.
talking about
But they're going to vote
though,
against
Mary
Kavanaugh.
Alice. They're going to vote against him.
Fair, but they're talking about asking for more facts, whereas Republicans are consistently now saying that they have made up their mind.
Right, but I think, though, Terry, at the end of the day, we know that this is not going to be suddenly a miracle that Brett Kavanaugh is going to win some Democratic votes. It's pretty much in the sand where both sides are going to vote on his nomination. I think we can all
Lisa
agree on
Murkowski
that.
just showed that it's not clear where all of the Republicans are going to vote.
Right, but I think as far as the Democrats are concerned, is
And
what I was
that
alluding
reflects
to.
the country as well. I guess it is just the times. Everything, right? Ice cream. Everything gets tossed into our totally polarized environment. In Minnesota, the vice chair of the DNC, Keith Ellison, has been accused of domestic abuse by his partner recently, like in the past few years. NPR in Minnesota ran a poll. Only 5% of Democrats in Minnesota believe Karen Monahan, the woman who's accusing Keith Ellison. We see these facts, alas, through our partisan lenses. And so do the politicians that we elect.
And arguably that's more reason for investigations, for neutral investigations to look into claims, and for processes to be in place to look at claims.
And Terry, quickly, just on that fact, what do we know for the process for Thursday? So we know they're going to start at 10 a.m., and we know, just based on what we heard from Dr. Ford's team, that they don't want to cross paths with Brett Kavanaugh.
That's right. Yeah. They don't want to see him, and they aren't likely to. And they are still very, very upset about this outside counsel, this professional questioner, which no one would be comfortable with. As I say, I think it's going to be somebody who knows what they're doing asking a question, but that can be uncomfortable. So it's possible that you may come in and say, "I'll only answer questions from senators."
Right.
We have no idea, but right now it's just she said. And then he said, and that's it.
This idea of Republican senators wanting outside counsel to help guide, ask smarter, more informed questions is one thing. They were also trying to avoid the optics, the plain and simple optics that there are only men on the Republican
100%.
side of that bench. Still, only men in a moment like this, and I think they knew that was just a bad picture.
Yeah, totally. We're going to have complete coverage of those hearings. They begin 10 o'clock on Thursday morning. Terry, you're going to be up there bright and early. It's going to be a long day. You can catch all of that right here on ABC. But I do want to move on. We had a little bit of I'd say a crazy day, but every day is lately crazy around here. And Rod Rosenstein yesterday, the back and forth with what's going to happen with his current position as the Deputy Attorney General of the United States. He spent quite some time yesterday meeting with Chief of Staff John John Kelly in reaction to that New York Times piece from late last week that ABC confirmed that he had been in conversations with the former deputy director of the FBI about wearing a wire and potentially even talking about the 25th Amendment. I do want to bring Catherine back in for this because, Catherine, this has been just a long weekend of back and forth that we've been learning from our reporting that Rosenstein had tossed the idea out there, then it was rejected. But at the end of the day, the issue really comes down to the White House does not want to have to fire him.
Exactly, and that would be viewed as extremely political, of course, in the wake of Mueller's investigation, because Rosenstein, he's been a frequent target of the president's anger and frustration vis-a-vis Robert Mueller and the length of the investigation. So I know with a lot of these departures, we talk about the firing versus resignations, but here it's extremely important. The White House doesn't want to come off as looking political, but at the same time, Rosenstein probably won't walk out of here on Thursday resigning. So it's still to be determined, but a flurry of activity here yesterday where our sources were telling us that he came over here to the White House to meet with Kelly, fully expecting to be fired. In front of cameras, though, the two shook hands, which is a highly unusual picture. You see it right there. To see outside this White House seems particularly staged. They want to show that he's leaving with his job, and he left smiling. So, John, who knows what will happen here on Thursday? But interesting, I want to say it was interesting this morning, though, when Sarah Sanders was on Good Morning America with George, and he asked her twice whether he has confidence in Rod Rosenstein, whether the president does, and she wouldn't answer that. She refused to answer. She says he has confidence in the system, wouldn't say if he would fire him, and the president, of course, wouldn't talk about that at UNGA today either.
A reminder, Thursday is going to be a really long day in Washington. Catherine Faulders at the White House, thank you for that. Before we leave you, how many days are left?
43.
You sure?
No.
You're positive? Did you check your chart this morning?
I don't know. We have a chart.
But you and the team down here have been doing a terrific job just getting us ready for what seems like the election night that's never going to come.
Time's slowing down.
Yeah, and I know you guys have been doing some incredible work about the diverse field that's building up for these midterms.
It's a history-making field, any way you cut it. It looks like Democrats are poised to make history in November. And I say Democrats because of some of these just record-breaking numbers of unique candidates. We have some of those numbers right there, just shattering previous records. The number of females that didn't just run this year, but won in their primaries. The number of people of color and openly LGBTQ candidates. Just for some context on that female number, think about this. There are 16 women that are on gubernatorial tickets this year running for governor. 16 women. Today, there are only 6 female governors, big picture.
Wow.
There are 239 female candidates for the House. There are only 84 female members of the House. So you have the potential of doubling, sometimes even tripling some of the numbers of representation in these categories, which is remarkable to think about.
I was struck the other day when we were talking about this and you were telling me about some of the data that you and the team had pulled together. I'm going to get this wrong, but thank God you're here to correct me. You were talking about Emily's List and the group they had reached out to, and not even so much the people that are on top of the ticket that are running, but the training they're doing that for the large number of women that want to just enter the political system.
Exactly. We were at a training over the weekend, and Emily's List says that they have trained 5,000 women this last year alone who are interested in running for any kind of office, school board, city council, local office. Many of them will probably end up helping out in campaigns too, maybe being a campaign manager, but they are just seeing such an unbelievable uptick in the number of women raising their hand this year.
It's definitely a diverse field on both sides. I mean, I think you're also seeing the race that I'm most, there's a couple I'm fascinated by, but I think 2 gubernatorial races where we're just seeing the broad spectrums of the Trump voter versus what's going on in Democratic politics is Georgia and Florida. I mean, I don't know if you disagree with me, but those 2 where I think, Terry, you just really see the split in this country.
You do,
out.
and it's sometimes I think we overemphasize how polarized and divided we are. We're still one people, and right now we're all in the mood to kind of throw the bums out. To get rid of the old generation of a very consensual and boring and inauthentic politics that among others Hillary Clinton kind of emblemized for a lot of emblemized, not a word, for a lot of people.
You're tired, Terry,
I am tired. But what I'm saying is that you do see this surge of somebody like me. And whether that's a Trumpian candidate who wouldn't have thought about getting into politics before the era of Donald Trump, or whether it is people rising up and women and non-white people and all kinds of people rising up and saying, boy, this is my government. They're kind of tired of who they have seen in there. And that's something actually that unifies us. We're going to go in different directions.
I totally agree. They're saying, but I would say it differently. People are saying, someone like us, we deserve to be represented. We look different and sound different and have different experiences than what we're seeing in Washington, and that should change.
Good message to leave it on, and that's what we're going to do. Stick with us here on ABC News for all the latest all day. You can download the ABC News app for any news anytime. For Terry Moran and Mary Alice Parks, I'm John Santucci. You are watching ABC News.